If you're looking to automate vendor onboarding requests in your organization, stay tuned because in this video, I'm gonna share a free Power Automate template that I built that allows users to submit new vendor onboarding requests, have the approvals sent to stakeholders in Teams, and if approved, add that piece of software to a central software inventory, email additional stakeholders such as procurement, and open a ticket with IT. So a lot to unpack today. We're going to go through a full tutorial, and additionally I'll provide that free template that you can use to upload and modify according to your business. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Nick. I create a lot of content around Microsoft and the SMB space. You can find a lot of my content at t-365.com. Okay guys, so getting into it here, I'm going to show you the automation end to end just so you understand what we're going to build. We're going to go through some prerequisites, and then I'll show you step by step how to configure this. So this is a Microsoft form that we've created here, and the user will fill out basic information that we're going to capture as part of our software inventory, and what also will go to other stakeholders in our organization that you'll see as we carry this out. We have some basic questions here, around what we talked about last week, actually, in the sense of our onboarding checklist or our vendor management policy that we'd want to have. We also have some considerations here for things that the CFO might want to know for budgeting. We have some website information, and then some more IT related questions around access as well as deployment to workstations, and then giving the user some free form text. So the user can come in here and we can go ahead and submit this. That's the trigger for our workflow. So the approvers that we have here will get notifications in Teams as part of the approval app, and it will contain all of the information specific to this approver and this use case for kind of going through the consent flow here. And I'm just going to say approved. Usually you can add more detail here. Obviously in a real life example, you probably want them to click on approve. This is a two-stage approval actually. And this is something that you'd be able to showcase as far as maybe CFO versus security approval versus legal approval. You could do multiple chains of events here. We're just doing two in this example. This is our other user that we're pivoting into now that also has this request. This might be the CFO looking at the estimated cost, measuring that against the budget, or something like, so in here I could say something like approved in budget. Part of the comments in this example, click on approve. Once that's completed, the user will get notification that the approvers have submitted their approval, and that's in that state. They'll also get an email here talking about the approval and what next steps look like. The procurement team will also get this notification for the procurement request with some information about the application. And then a ticket will be opened with support here, and this will give more information around the application as well as the approval details. Finally, the application will be added to a central software application inventory with all the details captured as part of that entry, including the approvers and timestamps that we can have as part of a, again, central application inventory for the company. Now that you know how the flow works, we'll go through some of the prerequisite steps. The first step is just kind of mapping out your existing process for your approval workflow and what you guys do today. You may involve procurement, you may involve the CFO, you may have a legal team that reviews application documents. So you really want to map that out maybe on a whiteboard or something like that if you don't have it written down in a process already, so you can understand how you would maximize the automation potential of this and may potentially critique the template that I built here. If you guys are enjoying this video on automation so far and are looking for other tooling to help automate your processes, check out a tool that I built called CloudCapsule that allows you to automate your Microsoft 365 security assessments. You can sign up single sign-on with your Microsoft credentials, and running assessment takes under 90 seconds for the average tenant. You can just enter a domain name, consent to the permissions, and then you'll start to have data streaming in for a comprehensive report that actually maps to compliance frameworks like the CIS controls. So if this looks interesting and you want to run a free assessment, go to cloudcapsule.io and run your free assessment today. The next prerequisite here is just creating a form. You can go to forms.microsoft.com or in your applications after you log in for forms. This isn't going to be a forms tutorial. It's pretty straightforward on how to create basic questions and dials or radial buttons here for selections or even drop downs that we'd want to have for these types of things like the department owner. So I'll let you dictate that. I'll again provide this as a template, but this is going to be something that's obviously you want to tailor to your organization, or if you're an MSP, tailoring it maybe to the organization you're going to set it up for. And the big thing I want to show you, like I've done in past videos, is likely you want to gate access to this form. I think it's probably the recommendation to gate access to just managers within the company or certain directors even, depending on the hierarchy. That way that it has some type of gated access in the sense of not just anybody can freeform ask for it. You may want to start there, but I think best recommendation would be to add groups here for managers within the organization. And then you can share this form or embed it somewhere, maybe on a SharePoint site, so it's just easy to access. Next, you will need to set up the resource for the software inventory. Today, in this example, I'm doing it to an Excel sheet that's part of an operations site within SharePoint. The automation account, again, if you set one up versus a regular user, will need access into this document. So they will need to be on the document as an owner, or at least have, edit capabilities to the document within here. So if you needed to do that, you would go into the sharing section and click on share and edit the permissions here for them to be edit, and then add the automations account to that so they can write to that. But as you can see here, I also, as a prerequisite, defined all of the column names that we're going to use as part of the automation. So you'll also want to set that up, and we'll be able to visualize that as part of Power Automate as we go through that workflow. Lastly here, we're sending emails via a shared mailbox versus an individual user, which is also a best practice that I would recommend as part of this. So if we go into our shared mailboxes here, I have one set up that's going to come from our support address. You could do anything that you want here as far as setting up a different type of shared mailbox that might be automations again, or even specific to that workflow as far as vendor onboarding. If you wanted all of the requests to flow into that mailbox or from that mailbox, you can do some central reporting on it later. But again, the big thing here is if you did create a service account, they need to be added as a member of this particular shared mailbox so that that works in the automation flow. Okay guys, that's all the prerequisites. So now to the fun part of actually setting up this automation. I'll give you guys the template here as well that you can just upload and configure, but I also want to do the tutorial so you understand how I'm configuring and thinking about all of the settings here, and I'm going to do it live, meaning I'm not going to autocorrect myself if I make a mistake, because I feel like that's good shared learning. As we keep going through there, you can get here by going to make.powerautomate.com, or if you sign into office.com, look at your applications, you should be able to access Power Automate. This is what, again, you would want to set up and log in as that automation account, that service account, if you're going to set it up with that. Just as an FYI, I'll get into how you can import my template a little bit later, but right now we're just going to go ahead and build an automated cloud flow, and we're going to call this vendor onboarding request -template. And our trigger is going to be when a new response is submitted from a Microsoft form. I'll click on create here. That would go ahead and create this. If you couldn't find that or you skipped through that accidentally, you can always add that as a trigger. With the parameters though, here it's basically asking what form are we going to be using. We're going to be using our vendor onboarding request form that we created as part of our prerequisites. Then we're going to be selecting the form again, and we're going to get the response details, which is basically saying, I want to get all the key value pairs of what was submitted as all the questions and answers. And again, we're going to select our vendor onboarding request. And then the response ID is a query here, a dynamic parameter we're getting from the previous action, which is the submitted form that somebody would use as part of the trigger. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is leverage the Microsoft Approvals app here, which is something that many of you may out there use today or maybe have never used, but it performs that workflow that we saw where a user can submit, that approval process across multiple users, which is recorded, and they can add commentary or deny it, things like that. So within here, we're going to say, we're going to start and wait for an approval. And within here, you could select a couple different ones depending on the levels of approvals that need to go in. I select sequential approval because we wanted to find multiple people here that were getting that request. But if it's just one person, That could be something that, you just say is approve, reject, everyone must approve, or custom responses, wait for all responses. We'll get into that in depth, just given that's a little bit more in detail. But what we're going to get into here is your title, which is application approval. And then we're going to dynamically populate the vendor name that we're getting from our form, which is then the response details. So this should be here within there, and that'll dynamically populate anything that comes through. And then we're going to go through these approval steps here, which is where we're assigning these members. I am hard coding these values within here, and you might likely as well if we're talking about the CFO needing to approve, as well as somebody within the legal department or security as part of that. Or you could maybe ask for that within the form submission and dynamically populate those values within here, as we'll see also with the requester of this form. It's up to you on how you would want to do that. It's flexible in that regard. But again, I am hard coding these values within here for the approval steps. This could also be done, I just want to call out, it could be done in the approve reject again as part of that. And then in the details section here, this is where we're adding all of the dynamic values that are coming from the form. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over for the sake of time. But with each one of those, you would use the dynamic addition here, and then go in and add the subsequent value of what we're doing here. So we're getting all of this that's going to go in as part of that request. And again, you could go ahead and chain multiple approvals as well too, to dynamically change what the details are, if that makes sense. So maybe I want the message to the CFO to be different than the message I send to the message that I send to our legal team or the security team as a use case. So within there, we're going to wait for that to be approved or denied. But also we want to go ahead and begin to gather some certain information here. So the next thing that we're going to do here is add another action just to get the current time. I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can grab a timestamp. This is kind of actually redundant after I looked at it again, but I wanted to add it in here just to show you a couple different options. Basically, we want to get that to get a timestamp that we can also add into our software inventory. So we have a timestamp of when this actually was approved and kind of onboarded into the organization. So the next thing that we want to do here is go ahead and add another value here for a control. And the control we want to have is a conditional statement. And basically we want to say, do something if this was approved and do another thing if it was denied. So in this case, we're going to say is approved as our value. And within here, we want to dynamically grab, in this particular case, the outcome of this. And in this particular case, we also want to say the outcome is equal to, and the values here are going to be approved, comma, approved, because we want to see that both of the approvers actually submitted that. And this is something that I got just from running a test case and clicking into this value to actually see what the JSON body was coming back for this value after I approved it on multiple cases as part of that. And so it was approved. You could do another workflow to say if it's approved and denied, do something else. So you could really customize that as well too. But in this particular case, we're saying, okay, this was approved. And then we're going to go in here. We're going to connect to Excel Online. This is again where you need that access for the service account if you didn't have that already. And within here, we're going to say we're not going to update a row. We're going to add a row to a table. And we're going to look for our SharePoint site within the location here. And this is going to be operations. The document library is just documents. And then the file we can browse is the vendor inventory. And the table is just table 1. I don't think I renamed that at all. So once it loads up here, you'll notice that advanced parameters, you caught that move from 0 to 16 because it's grabbing all of our column names out of there as well too. So we can actually go through and check all these off that we want to gather as part of the use case here. And then these ones, we may say in use yes, but these ones maybe are additional investigation. So we're going to add all those, and then we'll dynamically populate these values again by just going through and dynamically grabbing them from our form submission. And so you just go one by one here and selecting those. So I'll kind of fast forward or pause here just to fill those out. Okay, so I'm back here. I filled out a lot of those just from the form. I also want to show you can hard code values where you say it's approved. And then for the approval date here, also want to build an expression basically to format the date that we put in, as the timestamp. There's a couple different ways you could do this. And so we want to put an expression. One cool thing they've added in here with Copilot is the ability to generate an expression. So I might want to say, I want to format, the current time variable to and then I just put in month, day, date, year, and say create an expression. So the cool thing in here that you can do as part of this now with Copilot, just want to showcase that it's created an expression with Copilot, and you're just describing it here. So I want to say, I want to format the current time variable to month, day, date, year. And then it gives me the expression, and it has the current time, which is this guy right here. I can click on OK, and I can click on add, and that'll go ahead and add that and format it in that format, so I can add that into my Excel sheet here. And then on the approval deny notes, in this case, I'm just going to the entire response summary. If you wanted to, you could parse that out, and it's beyond the scope of this video, but just to grab the actual responses that you got out of there and comma separate them. I actually like getting the whole thing because you can see the full detail of the user and the comment and the timestamp of when they did that. So it's just kind of a better record, and it all fits into the Excel document there. So we're going to go ahead and rename this guy to add vendor to inventory. And then what we want to do on the deny side is actually just copy this action, and we're going to right click on the plus icon here and say paste the action. And instead of add row to table copy, we're going to say deny. We're also just going to say add vendor to inventory, if I could spell that right. And then within here, we can click back in. It's got to copy everything over we just did. And then we're going to say approved is deny for that. And we're going to say in use is no. And then it'll have the detail for us. So why that's helpful is just that we can see any type of duplicate request, or if somebody else in the department asks for that, we can look at that potentially in the future too to say, has this ever been requested? And then acknowledge, that we don't have to waste our time maybe in investigating that as well. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to send an email. So we're going to say send email, search for that in the actions. And we're going to send an email from a shared mailbox. And then this is the one, that's going to say send user confirmation. So this is where I had a particular flow here, or just message that I put into the body of this email, which was really just talking about next steps. So you may want to customize this based off of your flow here to talk about what next steps look like, but that's just a baseline template that you could use. And then this is actually going to come from our advanced parameters here as well too, in the sense of emailing who submitted the form. The responder's email, they didn't actually have to type that in. It's part of the body that comes through, as well as the submission time, which could be helpful in other use cases. And then you might just say this is called application approval, and then you add in the vendor name again as part of that context. So we'll just click on this, and we'll click on vendor name. And again, you can customize this as you see fit. The original mailbox, we're going to search here, and this is going to be that support shared mailbox that we're going to send from. But again, you could make it whatever shared mailbox you set up as part of that process. And then I'm just going to copy this action again, and we're going to right click and paste the action. And we're going to say here, send email to procurement. And this one, again, is dependent on your workflows and what information you'd want to provide within there. But it's still going to come from support. And in this case, it would go to whatever your procurement email is. In this case, I'm hard coding it. And I changed the subject line here to application procurement request. But again, this is all custom to whatever you'd want there. And then we'll right click one more time. And then we will copy that action one more time and paste that in there. And this one, we're just going to call create ticket. If I want to get really advanced, I could add a PSA tool connection to this. But here, if you're an MSP, as part of the subject line, I usually put in the context here of the customer name. In this case, it's just Contoso, application onboarding, and then vendor name. If you use a tool like ConnectWise or something like that, you can use workflows to automate triggers if this were to come in this format, to do something else on the opposite end of whatever your process might be within there. And obviously, you'd be sending it to your support email address there. That's part of your email connector. And then you'd paste in, I'm pasting in, but you can add all the relevant details. And this would be helpful to know, to add it to your documentation tool, to go ahead and, understand who needs access to the tool, if it should be deployed to workstations. You might want to gather some more information, but it's a good baseline just to show as a reference point for what we're doing within here. So that's everything. Once you're good here, you can click on save. It'll tell you if you got any syntax errors or if you can't access a mailbox for some reason. So this is a good one here. This provider workflow name is approved. These are invalid characters. So it does not I don't think it likes the question mark. So minimal errors in that case, but pretty simplistic flow overall. You could obviously chain more into this. And then to test this, you can do this manually and then just go submit the form and you'll see this run through here. I've actually run this already in the other example that I used to start off with here. So you'd be able to see the run history. So when you run that, you'll see if there's any errors going through. And this is where, again, I was mentioning I grabbed the body of this email to try to get what I showed you with approve, which is the outcome here as part of that. So that's how I knew what to provide in that particular case as far as the text that it was looking for to fulfill this conditional statement that this is a truthy value. So that's everything here, guys. The final section is just talking about how you can upload the template. I'll link that below where you can actually access that and grab it. But here on this page in my flows, instead of new flow, you would do import package legacy. And then you would go in and upload the package file here. And then subsequently, it'll just ask you to make your connections with the various applications, i.e. forms and the shared mailbox account, as well as the Excel sheet there. So if you have your service account, that's where you would do that afterwards. But that would allow you to import that and then tailor it further from there as far as entering in all of your information. Okay, guys, that's everything I had for you today's episode. Definitely comment below with any questions you had around the automation, and be sure to check the video description to get your copy of that template that you can modify for your business. I'll see you guys next week.